What's up YouTube, and welcome to another tutorial using Infinite Painter, where today we're going to create this beautiful lakeside design. Now this tutorial, as you can see from the duration, takes a little bit longer than what you're probably used to, as well as more layers than what you're used to. Throughout the design, we'll make our way from back to front, each individual element, where I'll be able to show you at each stage how you can save layers as you go. So you should be fine for your layers. However, I will show in the description down below how many layers you will need to complete today's design without any compression of anything. All the brushes are built in. The only thing you need is the palette image, which is up there, and I'll show you in the tutorial how you can introduce that into the actual canvas, and the canvas size, which is of course 2000 by 2000 like normal. So enjoy today's process, take your time with it, spend as long as you need on it. Don't feel like you have to be bound by the tutorial duration. Spend as long as you need on it and come back to it if you need to as well, day to day. But most importantly, have fun with it. So make sure to tag me in your finished creations when you're done. And if you want to support the channel and all the work that I do here, you can now become a member of the channel, where you get early access to these tutorials as well as sneak peeks and a loyalty badge beside your name that grows over time. So make sure to check that out using the link in the description down below. Thank you so much for taking the time to watch today's tutorial, and let's get started. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a canvas size of 2000 by 2000, and once you're through, you're going to hit create, and there's a couple of things I need you to get set up ready for today's design. First thing, of course, is going to be the palette. So we'll go up to the three dots in the top right. We'll go to the option of import, and then you're going to want to select where you've saved the palette image to. Once you've tapped on it, this menu will change, and you're going to want to select the option of reference, and then you'll be able to see the palette there in the top left. It's a copy from my original version that I created over on Procreate. So there's our palette, and you can see it's in a grid system, so I will let you know which colors to grab as we go through. Now, it's important to also note that my equipment, for example, you can see here from the color picker, if I tap anywhere, it changes the color based on what I tap on. If you don't have that functionality, you can go up to the three dots, go to settings. You can then go to gestures and long press and change it to the eyedropper. That way you'll be able to hold down with a finger, and you can see a little ring pop around my finger there, and you'll be able to select the color as we go. The other thing we need to do is we need to go to our create options. We need to go to perspective, and we're going to scroll across to the option of the grid. We're going to make sure one, it's visible, so you need to tap on this icon here and then the magnet icon until you get the two white dots, and you just want to drag this one here all the way into the very bottom right of our canvas. Now what that'll give you a 4x4 grid, so you can use the grid against my grid to work out where I'm scaling things and how I'm positioning things on the canvas. It just makes life a little bit easier because then you've got the grid to look at, and then you can turn off the magnet when you're done. So we'll leave that up there because we're going to keep that throughout. So getting started, we're going to go to our background. So we're going to go ahead and I usually put it on another layer typically. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to grab this color here, the bottom right of the palette, this light blue tone. We're going to go to our create options and go to fill, and we'll tap in the middle of the screen and hit the tick when we're done. We will then go ahead and position our mountains. So we're going to create a new layer. We're going to go to our brush. I'm going to go ahead and use calligraphy and the monoline brush. If I go to my settings for the monoline brush and I go to stroke, we will need a little bit of smoothing, but not too much. So I think we could go up to around about sort of 25 there on the smooth under stroke. You can hit the back arrow here when you're done. And the size, it doesn't really matter too much because we're going to end up sort of filling it in anyway. So I'm going to go up to around about sort of 17, 18 if we can. And the color we want to grab is at the top here of the third column from the right, this one here. Once you've tapped on that, we're going to go ahead and draw in our mountain. Now the first thing I want you to do is draw in a horizontal line across your screen, sort of roughly 2/3 down in this row. Hold your pen down at the end and pop your finger on the screen to make sure it's nice and straight, like so. So it goes edge to edge. I'm going to bring the size down just a tiny bit, down to about 15. And then what we're going to do is we're going to position sort of roughly 3 peaks of our mountains. We're going to put a peak here, which is then going to sort of come back down to around about here. It's then going to go back up, and it's going to hit another sort of peak around about here. We'll drop one down into there, come back up again on ourselves. So we're creating a dot to dot at this point, and we're going to run all the way down into sort of here, through there, and then sort of make our way out at a little bit of a low point. And then over here on the left, we're going to come in from roughly here. So again, this is why the grid system is in play, because then you can see against my screen where to lay things out accordingly. I'm just going to create a dot to dot. That's all I want you to do. Now what I typically do is I typically create sort of one of the peaks first, and then I will sort of create the sort of triangular point of it and just let that run out. Now I'm going to bring the brush size down a little bit again. I want to bring it down to 10 this time. And I'm going to go ahead and create another peak, and then maybe I'll add some sort of bumps and lumps here, but ultimately I want to run up into a nice strong peak up here, bring that down, and again I'll just let go, because then I want to run it into another peak here, and I'm going to run this down here, following my dot to dot, and just allowing that to run off to the right hand side. Now what you then want to do is go to your create options, go to fill, and then tap and drag to the right hand side so you get rid of the fuzzy line that may appear, and hit the tick when you're done. Now at this point you just want to take a look at your mountains and see if you want to make any adjustments. Maybe I'll grab my eraser and use calligraphy and the monoline brush as well. Doesn't matter what the size is, something nice and small, again roughly the same sort of size as we had before. And I'm just going to sort of chop into here a little bit. I want this peak to have a little bit more sort of pointiness to it rather than the effect that I had before. Maybe a little bit of a chop off at the top, maybe the tiniest little bit. So a little bit of a flatter peak there, right up on the top. And then maybe here too, I'll sort of chop into here and maybe create something a little bit more interesting, a little bit more angular. And you can always switch back to your brush if you want to, and introduce some additional sort of shapes in here. It's much better to do it at this stage of your design. You don't want to sort of have a design that you want to make adjustments to later and then realize you might have to redo a whole load of work. Taking a look at the rear over here, I think we can maybe introduce some additional little bumps and lumps in there too. This one here definitely needs a little bit of sharpening. So what I mean by that is like just a couple more sort of sharper pointy edges to it, and that's where sometimes you may want to bring your smoothing down a little bit as well. Again, I'll grab the fill tool and tap and drag in there, drag to the right, and if there's any fuzzy areas we can get rid of it if needs be. But ultimately that's looking really good. I like how that looks. We've got something nice to work off of. So let's go ahead and create a new layer, tap on it and clip it to the mountain. And at this point let's go ahead and pinch the two layers together. If you don't have this available, just create a group and drop the layers in, but you can pinch two layers together to create a group. And I'll tap on the group, I'll rename it, and I'll call it mountain. So I always do this with bigger designs. It's much easier to keep an eye on where everything is. So let's rename that group and call it mountain. And then we'll tap on the folder icon here to open that back up. So we're on this layer that's clipped. We're going to go to this color here, the middle of the third column from the right. We're going to go to our brush. We are going to move into the option of chalks, and we're going to use the cracked chalk brush. The size is probably going to want to be sort of around about, let's go, what sort of scale is that? That's a little bit too small. We want to kind of just chuck it in to start with. So let's maybe go for like a 50, if not slightly bigger. Let's go up a tiny bit more, up to about 60. And if we go to the options here, I'm just going to bring the flow down the tiniest bit down to 75 there. So my light source is going to be over on the right hand side. Let's move our layers out the way. Light source is over here. So you would typically highlight then the right hand side of the mountain with the brighter tone. So we're going to come down a peak here, and we're just going to allow that kind of just to run down. Okay, so we're just creating like a bit of area where the snow is just resting on this mountain peak here. I'm going over it a few times there, and I'm just running it down, creating some interesting ridge lines, etc. Maybe there's then like another sort of ridge line here, which if you're going to draw one in the middle of the mountain, you're going to need to bring the brush size down to about 19, for example, and create like a little bit of a more precise looking sort of ridge line. So what I'm trying to do here is I'm just changing the brush back up to 30. I'm just trying to create like a bit of a sharp point so I can then create like another ridge that then runs down and into the land. Notice how when we get really low, the land is starting to just go a little bit sort of horizontal. So you start off quite sharp, coming down at quite some steep angles, and then from there you want to then create some nice smoothing out as you make your way down towards the bottom area. Now with these sort of mountains at the minute, they've got these sort of rounded points on them, so you can do one or two things. I'm going to keep them in. We're going to go to our eraser and tap on our eraser. We'll go to chalks and we will switch it to the cracked chalk brush. We'll keep the size nice and small, something around about maybe 15. And you can just sort of sharpen these edges up a tiny bit. This is much easier to do now than it is in a moment. So I'm just sharpening up a few of the points there where I want to kind of introduce some areas of snow and sort of a bit of a sharper kind of ridge point to it, and make them a little bit wobbly if you can, just so that they're not too boring in their shape. And they're a bit too repetitive to each other. So let's see if we can sort of maybe change that up with like the odd sort of speckle here and there of some more color, and then go back to the eraser, maybe take away a little bit on the top there just to sort of create a bit of a sharper point. You can create whatever sort of landscape you want here, okay? You don't need to match up to mine necessarily. You can create whatever you want. Bob Ross used to say that. It's your world, you can do whatever you want. And that is very, very true. So let's just chop away. I'm just adding in extra tiny details. Now don't sort of stress over the details too much because they're going to get smudged in a minute anyway. Let's go back to our brush though and what we were doing before. So let's go to about sort of maybe 30 here. And I'm just going to run another peak here down, and then this one. Let's just keep this one fairly simple. Maybe a couple of dashes here, for example. So this is what we're going to roll with. You can see that side of the mountain already in play. What we're then going to do is we're going to create another new layer. We'll drag it underneath though, so it sits just above the base shape. We'll grab the grey tone here, the bottom of that third column from the right, and we'll just introduce some of this sort of other side of the mountain. So we'll introduce a little bit here, just a tiny bit. You kind of don't want to go right up towards the sort of ridge line there, but it's not a problem if you do. Another sort of couple of points here, and then I'm just leaving gaps, and here I want to make sure that in behind this one has some good grey in there. So we're separating them, we're creating all these really interesting avenues for how the land flows. And down here maybe we'll introduce a bit of grey, just following that ridge line down. On the back of some of these small ones you can maybe just dash in a tiny bit, though I don't recommend you sort of pile it in. Notice how I've gone a little bit sparing on this shadowed side compared to the right hand side, okay? Trying to just bear that in mind. Now we're going to get into the smudging phase. So we're going to go to our smudge tool, we'll tap on our smudge tool, and we're going to use paint and the dry ink brush. If you take a look at my settings here, you can see the flow's been brought down a little bit, opacity is very high. And the brush size, what size is that? Let's go to about sort of a, yeah, I think something around about sort of a 80 to 70 looks pretty good. Now, we're currently on the opposite side. I want to start on the highlight side, so I'm going to go back up to those highlights, and we're going to start smudging. And again, in a similar fashion, when we get to the bottom, we want to let this smooth out. So I'm starting to push this out, okay? Just pushing it out, streaking that down as we make our way down the mountain. So you're streaking it in, you will start to sort of create a lot more of a smooth aesthetic to it. But towards the top of the mountains, we will preserve a lot of our kind of chalk there. So as we're coming down, we're swooping. So we're coming from up here and we're swooping that way. And look at how like we've changed up the landscape there. Sometimes you may not like it. You don't have to do it absolutely everywhere. So, you know, this is, again, your environment. You pick and choose what you want to sort of blur out. It's totally up to you. You can smudge it down in a more vertical fashion as well. That creates a lot of sort of verticality to it. So you can push that one down, for example. And you can maybe just at the top here, just give it like a little bit of a smudge, just to maybe take away a tiny bit here and there. Nothing too intense, but you get this beautiful soft effect. We'll do the same here, okay? We'll just push this across. You can make your brush size a bit bigger if you want to just make life a bit easier and quicker. So about 88 there. And as you get towards the bottom again, we're kind of slowly starting to follow the land as it makes its way into a much flatter plane. And you're just pushing that across, pushing it down. And then we reflect that on the opposite side. We go to the opposite side, the grey side, and again, you just bring that down, bring that down, bring this one down. You don't have to get rid of absolutely everything, remember. So you can leave a little bit of that cracked charcoal in there. I can bring this one down, I can swoop it and leave gaps where you think you want to separate things. So I can bring this grey here, and I can leave gaps in between, and I can just push that across. Really swoop that out, and you can bring it in from the opposite side and take away a little bit of the color. Like here, I'm coming in from the outside edge there, taking away a little bit of the color. So you don't have to have too much. Take a look for your other little gray spots that you added in, and then you should end up with this beautiful soft aesthetic to your mountain range. Now at the minute, it's got a little bit too much sort of color towards the bottom. So what we'll do is we'll create a new layer, and just to make life easier, let's go up to the 3 dots and hit save, just so we can make it a bit easier on the app. We'll go back to this color here, the top of the 3rd column from the right. We'll go to our brush, we'll tap on the brush, and we'll go to the option of sprayers, and we're going to use the soft airbrush. Making sure we're on the soft airbrush, we're going to set our size a little bit larger to, what size is this? That's around about 600, that looks pretty good. What we want to do is we just want to go kind of left to right and just very lightly just blend out the bottom there. Blend out the bottom like so, until it starts to just fade down and it loses a little bit of its color. Now, we also want to sort of bear in mind that if you don't have pressure sensitivity, you may need to bring these right down to like 10% and just keep going over and over and over again, just to build up the graduation there of the color change. The other step that we will also go ahead and do is we will tap on the layer here for the mountain. We will tap on it and add a mask to it. And we will repeat what we've done. So you can see now we've got this mask that's added. We want to make sure our color is set completely to black in the bottom right. Soft airbrush again still, and again we're just going to go left to right, and we're going to fade out the bottom here. Now every time you do this, you are sort of introducing the concept of like a bit of haze, but we also ultimately want to kind of blend out our mountain range, just tiny bits on the edges, but making sure we get rid of that straight line in the middle. So just take your time to kind of haze this out at the bottom, bit of mist almost, and you should end up with this beautiful kind of floating mountain landscape. Let's then go ahead and work on a few different other colors that are going to sit in the background. Now, with a design like this, where we've got a lot of layers that we're ultimately going to use, you may struggle with your own device. If you need to, you can tap on a group and you can do the option of flatten, which merges all the layers in that group down. Of course, you can't make any changes afterwards. So just keep that in mind. If you need to, that's something you can do for your device later on. For now, I'm going to collapse the mountain group down. I'm going to leave it. I'm going to go down to the background here where I'm going to create two new layers. The bottom one out of the two, we're going to go to our colors and grab this dark blue at the top of the second column from the right. And we're going to go with our soft airbrush. Let's make the brush size a bit bigger, about 800-ish. We'll go left to right. We're going to make our way up the screen. And we're ultimately just going to get towards the bottom of that mountain where we start to see a little bit of that light blue just remain, and that's it. The bottom down here is your water. So we want to darken up the very bottom and just let that fade out at the top. Then we're going to go ahead and drag that above the other empty layer. And then the middle layer here, we're going to start on our sky. So we're going to go to our colors and grab the color in the top right of the palette. Again, brush size, I'm going to make it even bigger again, probably up to about 800. And we're going to create a lovely gradient. So I'm going to start in the bottom right here, very light pressure, curving my brush stroke as I go, kind of fading up towards the blue, but leaving a lot of that color there in the very bottom right of your sort of your sky there. Now, if you need to, go ahead and bring the flow down, bring the opacity down, depending on your pressure. Let's then also go ahead and create another new layer. We'll go to our colors and we'll grab this color here, the bottom of the second column from the right. And then just down here, we're going to go in a rounded motion just to introduce a little bit of a light sort of orangey yellow tone down here. Nice, beautiful bit of color. Now, that's your sort of background area done. Now, for a minute, let's also pinch these three layers together. So the orange down to the light blue. We'll open that up so you can see again, and we'll tap on it and we will rename it. And let's call it sky. Let's call it sky. Hit rename. And just like I've mentioned, hit the three dots and hit save. It makes it a lot easier on the app. Now, we're then going to go ahead and grab the color in the top right of the palette again. We're going to go to our brush. We're going to go to charcoals. And once we're in charcoals, we're going to go ahead and use the soft charcoal brush. We're going to create some clouds. So with this brush, we're going to set the brush size to, that's a very, very small size. We're going to make that a lot bigger, probably even larger than that. Let's go even higher. Let's go to about sort of the 120 mark. But before we just carry on, let's go ahead and hit the plus icon here to create a new layer in the sky group. And then we'll move them out the way for a minute. Up here, we're going to start roughly around about here, circular motion, like so. You can see where I've come in from the edge of the canvas. I'm going through this point of our sky and then coming across just a tiny bit. And then from there, I'll kind of add in a little bit more color in here, kind of rounding out the shapes, creating rounded, fluffy objects. And then on the rear of them, i.e. the left-hand side, we're just going to lightly kind of fade them out. Don't worry too much though, we are going to blend in a moment. But for now, that's kind of your objective. And we'll add in some color. Don't be afraid to add in some color in the middle of the body of the cloud. We'll also create another cloud that's going to come up from around about here. Circular motion again. We'll push one over towards like this point here. We'll fade that out. Fade it out on the left-hand side too. Lovely stuff. And then over here on the left edge, we'll also introduce another cloud that's going to sort of run in from behind the mountain. Fluffy, and just let that raise up on the edge there. So we're going for some quite sort of sharp angular clouds almost. They're quite, they're pointing quite down. Just an artistic liberty. Sometimes you can have fun with it. It doesn't have to be too serious all the time. So once you've got your clouds like so, we're then going to go ahead and grab the middle of the far right column there. bring that brush size down. So it was around about 116. We're going to bring it down to about sort of 68 now. And we are going to patch in some highlight tone on the right hand side of some of these rounded shapes that we can see. So we're going around some of the right hand side, again, of the rounded objects that we can see. Most of the time the rounded side is just typically just the right side on this occasion, because that's where the light source is coming from. I'm going to let a little bit of white just tail out there. I'm going to introduce some right up here, because it's always important to remember the outer edge of your canvas. You know, how does the cloud run off the edge of your scene? You know, how does it run off and give you some space to introduce some more color? Here we'll introduce a little bit more on there too. Rounded edge, you can leave gaps in there, it doesn't have to be too sort of packed in and consistent. And that looks pretty good. Maybe the odd random little patch here and there looks pretty good. And then from there we can start to smudge. So we're going to go to our smudge tool. We'll tap on the smudge tool. We're going to go ahead and go into the option of sprayers. We're going to use the medium brush. So we've got the medium airbrush. We've got the opacity and flow set like so, 58, 56, softness 50. And the size, I've got it set to 104. That does look pretty good. What we're going to do is we're going to smudge up towards our white edges. So you can go in a rounded motion. That's always the best thing with clouds, rounded motion. And just round this out. You can push the dark tone up towards the light tone, or you can bring the white tone across. Look at how that gets really soft and fluffy. Now I don't want you to get rid of absolutely every single one of these edges here. Some of these really crisp elements of your sort of charcoal that we just introduced are really good for detailing, like again, sharpness of the design. So you don't have to get rid of them all the time, okay? So just try and sort of have a bit of a balancing act with your details. You know, you can smudge the top like I am right now, but you can take your time just to sort of pick and choose. Down here on the very edge, which goes for like the left hand side, you kind of want to go in a circular motion and just feather that out, blending it out, essentially just blurring it. So you're going round in a circular motion, just feathering that out. And you can then push back up from the bottom if you want to kind of push the purple and the pink right back up towards the cloud if you want to redefine its shape a little bit more. So there's a lot of balancing act with the smudging. I'm just pushing this down. I'm occasionally getting rid of a few, but then I'm leaving these lovely little trails and then the odd little wispy sort of elements here. We want it to have an artistic sort of styling to it. We don't want to get rid of it too much. I'm going to hit the 3 dots and save. It's just, again, just a great reminder for yourself to do so as well. Which makes life a lot easier. It's going to circular motion. Fade out the rear of all of these clouds. Just blending them out. Blending them out. Pushing the pink up towards the light sort of pink tone, pushing the dark tone up towards the light tone, and vice versa. Again, don't get rid of everything. Leave your clouds with a little bit of sort of texture to them. I'm going to just try and fade out the edge here, just so it nicely runs out. And that doesn't look too bad, actually. I quite like that, and I love this wispiness up here. And it kind of then gives a bit of a relation to the mountains, because the mountains have got their own texture in as well. So this is one of the larger projects that we've done here on the Joel Designs channel. I've done this over on my main channel, Joel Create, but this one is one of the larger ones here. So please make sure to let me know in the comments down below. 1, how did you get on? Did you enjoy it? And I know we're at the very beginning of it, but just as a reminder for you. And then also, would you like to see more of these type of bigger projects? It does show the capabilities of what Infinite Painter can do, and also maybe push your skill set as well, or maybe even just give you something to work towards at a later stage. So let's just keep blending these out like so. We're going to end up with a nice big colourful sky. Again, I'm pushing some of them back. I'm trying to retreat them back towards the cloud. I don't want to lose its structure too much, but I do want that soft edge. So it's a real balancing act, going around in a circle. That one there is looking lovely. Let's go ahead and keep going. We've got one more behind this mountain over here. Circular motions, just allowing this to really fade out as it makes its way up towards the edge of the canvas. Blurring. I do have more tutorials that are good for clouds, so maybe we'll introduce some new ones soon. Lovely stuff. Fading that out. And that's as simple as clouds need to be sometimes. Just really, really simple shapes, little bit of colour, but a bit of smudging will also go a long way. And that's going to be our sky. Now, again, it's totally up to you. You can tap on this group, you can tap on it and use the option of flatten. It's totally up to you. I'm going to preserve the layers. And again, because we're done with that stage, let's hit the 3 dots and save. Next up, we're going to move into a forest area here. So let's move our layers out so you can see. Now we're going to go ahead and let's just tap on our water here for a moment. You saw it flash. Let's create a new layer and drag it in front of the mountains up here. We're going to go ahead and we'll create a new layer. We'll tap on the new layer and clip it to the empty one. And while we're here, just pinch them two together. That puts it in a group, and let's rename the group, and we'll call it land. We'll just call it land 1 because we're going to end up with multiple variations on the land sources. So we'll hit rename. We're in the land 1 group, and if we open that up, we have a layer at the bottom. So there's one clip to it, empty for a moment. On this layer, we're going to go ahead and go to this color here, the top of the 4th column from the right. We're going to go to our brush, and it's actually going to be the soft charcoal brush that we're going to use for our trees. So we're going to set the brush size to something nice and small to start with, maybe around about the 10 mark. Let's move our layers out of the way. And you're going to want to bring in your sort of tree line here. So roughly, we can go a bit further than that. We can probably stretch that out a bit further. So we're trying to draw in a bit of a line to start with. That's your guideline as to your land. You can see on the left-hand side, I'm letting it get really, really faint. You can see the positioning, it's midway through that 3rd row. And then at the bottom of here, just press a little bit firmer if you have pressure sensitivity, or just go over it a few times and just block in the bottom area of the land. Maybe bring this round on the right-hand side just a tiny bit. You know, you're creating a land source in the distance, and we're going to create some trees. So from there, we're going to go ahead and we're going to draw in lots of lines. So these are your tree trunks. They are your guidelines for your forest. So we're just going to keep going. We're going to keep drawing in lots and lots of trees. Random gaps in between. Don't be afraid to put 2 right next to each other. Just remember, this is far in the distance, so we don't want to add in too much in terms of scale or nor detail. And so at the minute, what I always do is when I draw forests like this, I draw like a lot of sort of tree trunks like this. It gives me an idea for the scale. It gives me an idea for sort of the height of every tree as it makes its way down towards the end here. We're going to start to almost not do anything. We're just going to add in the tiniest little lines here. Imagine that the forest actually gets further away on this piece of land as it makes its way to the rear over towards the mountain. And it gives me, again, see that graduation in the height. These ones over here on the right hand side are nice and tall. Maybe they're up on a hill. Maybe we'll change the land in a minute. But it gives you an idea then to lay out your forest. From there, what you're going to want to do is zoom in, and I just want you to wiggle down the tree. Wiggle down the tree, and as you get further down towards the bottom, make it a bit wider. Every tree is going to look different. I don't want you to stress over this at all. Go up and down trees. Doesn't matter if they touch. Doesn't matter if they are like overlapping each other. Doesn't matter if it turns out to almost be like a blob of color. Again, it's miles in the distance. It's absolutely miles away. We're just trying to make sure that the bottom area gets nice and packed in. Our land too, as you go, if you can, just try and sort of pack that in. And at the bottom of your forest, just go around in a circular motion, just to kind of fill out the bottom area. You just want the tops of the trees. So that's what we need to do now, apply all the way across. So wiggle down your trees, wiggle down them, wiggle down the trees. It's meant to be nice and fun. Wiggle, super simple. You see some of them really do just look like scribbles, but that's all it needs to be sometimes. I think some people overcomplicate it. Circular motion just in the sort of middle to bottom area of your trees, and make sure the land is nice and packed in. And again, go down, wiggles, lots of wiggles. Introduce more trees if you feel like there's a gap that's too much of a gap. You know, I definitely feel like there's a gap here that could be filled in. And I'm just making sure that the land's nice and solid. And what I mean by solid is I don't want any sort of white gaps in there. I don't want any sort of little painting streaks almost. I want it to be nice and solid. And as we start to make our way down here, you'll notice we can't really do much of the sort of circular motion towards the bottom. That's simply because obviously the tree line is starting to get smaller, it's starting to get a bit further away, so we can't do that quite as much, and that's perfectly fine. It's more this top right area I'm imagining is like super dense. Coming down here. And again, just to sort of reiterate, as Bob Ross used to say, this is your world. You can do whatever you want. If you think, Joel, I actually think something else would look nicer here. I think it would look better if the trees look like this. You do whatever you want. But this is good practice, and then when you come to do your own work, you'll know exactly what to look for next time. Let's go along this edge. Let's really chuck that in. Here in the distance, I don't want this to I want this to fade out. So it doesn't need to be too thick. We just want it to really fall out as it makes its way all the way over there. And I can see I've got some interesting sort of design here. Maybe I'll even sort of adjust the land here and bring that right out. Maybe like a bit of a a bit of a point like here, and then maybe it kind of comes back on itself a bit more down here. So we're taking like a bit of an artistic liberty in a sense like that, just creating whatever land we want. And don't forget, you're going to end up with your foreground right here as well. So we had a clipped layer to it. Let's go ahead and on that clip layer, go to the green here in the middle of the fourth column from the right. And then all you're going to do is zoom right back in again. And we're going to dash a few times. Maybe make the brush size a bit smaller. Maybe go down to around about sort of a 5 and kind of just literally go down some of the trees, more so towards the top, and just wiggle your pen. Wiggle your pen. It will randomly drop in some color, and that is exactly what we want. We don't want any detail here. We're just wiggling our pen. And what that does is, although it's a silhouette of the sort of the trees back there, it just shows a couple of trees that are getting enough lighting that the lighting is then telling us what color that object is. So even though it's been lit from behind, because that's where our sun is, some of these trees here now have got enough lighting that we can see a little bit of the green colors coming through. You can see I'm not going down into this dark area, just squiggling my pen up and down the tree. That is all you need to do. Again, sometimes it's just the simple option. Sometimes it's also about sort of giving someone the sort of overall impression of what you're looking at, but not enough detail to really criticize almost. So that's that piece of land done. You can go ahead and you can collapse that folder down. You can tap on it and flatten it into one layer. That is perfectly fine because we will use it later on. So for now, we're going to go 3 dots. We're going to hit save. We're going to go ahead and create a new layer. If it clips itself at the top, just tap on it and unclip it. We want it up here on its own. And we will also go ahead and put it in a group. So we'll tap on the folder icon. It will put it in that group automatically, and we'll rename this group and we will call it Land 2 and hit rename. So in here, we've got our empty layer. We're going to go ahead and we're going to grab this color here, the top of the 5th column from the right. We're going to go to our brush. We're going to start off with calligraphy in the monoline brush. We're going to make sure that our brush size is nice and small again, around about sort of 22. That's probably a little bit too big. We'll bring that down to around about 10. And we're going to draw in our next piece of land that's going to sit towards the bottom left area here. So we're going to allow that just to sort of run in from around about sort of here. And we're just going to bring that in to around about there on our point, and then bring up a round sort of mound up here of land. We're going to end up with some bushes on here, etc. So we're going to go to our fill tool, tap and drag to the right a couple of times just to make sure it's nice and filled in, and hit the tick when you're done. And then what we'll do is we're going to draw in our tree first of all. So we're going to create another new layer, same color. We're going to go back to our brush. We're going to go back into charcoals and use that soft charcoal brush again. The size is going to be set to something a bit small. Let's go to around about sort of the 10 to 15 mark, somewhere in there. And the first thing I want you to do is draw in your main column for your large tree. Where's that going to sit? Where do you want it to live? Now I want to sort of prioritize this mountain a little bit. It's good to have the layering, but sometimes you want to sort of really tell people where to, you don't want to sort of block anything. So I'm going to start up here. I'm going to draw in a straight line down towards this area of land. I'm just going to draw in. I want it to get nice and thin at the top. So I'll bring that down to around about sort of a 5 point there at the top. And we're just going to bulk in that central point of what is going to be our tree trunk. It does not need to be super straight. It can be nice and wobbly. It's totally up to you. So that's your tree trunk. What you can then do is, if we set the brush size to around about sort of 10, we can just go left to right, gradually making branches as we go, wiggles and squiggles. So sometimes it may be easy to start at the top. And in fact, I'm going to bring the brush size down to an 8. I'm going to start at the top. You may want to leave a little area at the top, just like a tiny little bit at the very, very top there for some character it's just on its own. It's a bit naked towards the top. And you can just wiggle your pen along here, and you're gradually creating these kind of sort of U shapes, upside down U shapes that have little sort of branches that run out at different angles. Underneath, you just want like a little bit of the charcoal there just to kind of create some illusion of branches sticking out. So it's almost at this middle point here, you've got branches sprouting out at every angle and coming towards us, and then on the opposite side as well. So you can literally just draw in a bit of a U shape, lots of lines down like this, like so, and then just make your way down your tree. Try not to make the gaps too consistent, so occasionally just leave like a larger gap, at least for the minute, because then you can just sort of make the decision, okay, I'll just put in like a tiny little bit in there just to fill out the tree, but nothing too full. We'll go left to right again, and you can see as you get further down, you're gradually getting wider and wider with the branches. You can put some more in the gaps if you want to really fill it out. Towards the bottom typically is where your tree will end up being the thickest. So here, vary up some of your branches as well. Have some sort of curved and facing a bit more down. Some of them you may want to sort of draw them in a bit more of a horizontal fashion. You know, have the odd sort of variety. Nature is random. Nature, although it has sort of structure to its sort of tree, the branches are all individual widths, individual sort of angles, individual heights, etc. So randomize as much as you can. And like here, I'm drawing two quite close together, and I'm just going to wiggle the pen underneath, and I can see it's got like a really nice character to it. And it doesn't have to get super chunky at the bottom and wide. You don't have to really sort of flush it out too much. In the gaps, I think I will introduce a few more branches. And sometimes, again, it's just about simplicity. And sometimes as well, creating something that has a painting style to it, you can sometimes get away with a certain aesthetic that doesn't require too much detail. So we're going to wiggle our pen, creating little sort of streaks here and there. And also I'm limited by time, but you're not. So if you need to, you can spend as long as you like just detailing your tree, as much as you like. I'm limited by somewhat the, making sure a YouTube video is not too long. For you though, you've got multiple days potentially to get the same project complete. And then we're just going to go through. Again, I want some to be like really close together. So occasionally you may end up with like the odd little sort of black blob here and there that is just color, just chucked together. And if we take a look at our sort of the general look at the tree, that looks really good. I'm really pleased with how that looks. The only thing you could do is maybe bring the brush size down to like a 3.8. And if you need to, on here, just sharpen up some edges where you think like it's looking a little bit too opaque maybe, and maybe you just want to draw in the odd little line here and there for detail, maybe a couple at the very top there, and maybe just sharpen up the sort of very ends of them. But again, it's the rounding of the brush, so it's up to you if you want to keep that aesthetic or you want to get in here and draw in some branches. Also, don't be afraid to sort of draw in a branch that like just runs down and maybe sort of overlaps the other one. It's just a bit of a fallen one, maybe a bit damaged in the wind, who knows, but just sort of drag that down. I always say in a lot of my other tutorials, if you can come up with a convincing story or an argument as to why you've done it, that's all that matters. If I can tell you, no, some of these branches are fallen because it was a bit too windy, that's all you need to know, and that's all your justification done. Awesome, there's your tree. Take a look at the rest of your design, look how it's all coming together. Now at this point, we will go ahead and we'll create a new layer. We're going to keep the same color and we're going to go to our brushes. We're going to go ahead and we're going to go into misc here, so miscellaneous. We're going to go to the dried sponge brush, which is what we're going to use for our bushes. If I take a look at the settings here, they're currently maxed out on opacity and flow, but that will change. And size, we've got a 138, but that's massive at the minute. So let's go ahead and bring that down. Let's go down to about 45. And then what you're going to do is you're going to go round in a circular motion here and just use this messy edged brush here to push the tree back and create bushes along here. So kind of just rounded shapes, just varying up that sort of more perfect monoline shape there of the land, and just bring that down like so, all the way somewhat towards the water's edge. Don't go all the way down. So that's everything on this side that we need in order to start detailing it and coloring it. Hit your 3 dots and save, of course. Now let's go ahead and start on the tree. We're going to create a new layer and tap on it and clip it to the tree. From here, we're going to go ahead and grab the color that is going to be the middle here of the 5th column from the right. So this color here. Brush wants to go ahead and go back into the charcoals and the soft charcoal brush. I'm going to set that size to, let's set that to, what size is that? 23. That looks a little bit large. Let's just make it a bit smaller, around about 15. And we're going to color away on these branches. So we're just going to dash, scrape, etc. Add in some green down some of these branches. So let's remember again, light source is over here on the right hand side. So therefore the tree primarily should have a good solid amount of sort of green towards the right hand side, a little bit less over towards the left hand side. You can add green there. It is a green tree, of course, but you can see there's not a lot of sort of attention required here. I'm just making sure I go over the center of the tree as well. So we go over that center point of the tree. And then over here on the right, more so, Just making sure that there's not too many really dark areas. There's not too many areas that I would look at and go, hang on, shouldn't there be some light on that? So I'm going to go along here. You can just do your right side if you want to start with. Maybe even bring that brush size down. Let's bring that down to an 8.8 and literally just scribble our pen in a kind of zigzaggy style fashion. There are loads and loads of little sort of shoots coming off of all of these branches. You do not want to spend time working out where each angle is. Sometimes it's just a scribble. I've said this from the start. Sometimes it's about keeping it simple. Let's go up the very top of the tree here and then go down the left, but just sparingly, not quite as much. Just sparingly. We do have another green to add in a second, so you will be able to kind of highlight the right side a bit more anyway. It's the brighter tone underneath. We'll add in some down here across the middle, again making sure you kind of show that a few of those branches, if you do like a dash in a downward fashion in the middle, it shows a sort of branch almost facing us and pointing right at us. Go down here, just dashing lines, dashing lots of dash lines, because then that kind of almost gives you the impression like you've spent time creating branches in there. And then you should have some nice color coming together on this tree. Lovely stuff. Let's then go ahead and I'm going to create a temporary second layer. So you'll be able to save your layers in a minute. So we created a new layer, it's clicked itself. We're going to go to the yellow at the bottom of that fifth column from the right, this one here. I'm going to zoom back in and we're going to dash down. And dash down along some of the top of the branches, more so on that right hand side again. We're trying to be aware of where our light source is. A couple in the middle will look fantastic, but just warming up this right hand side with this lovely yellow tone. A couple branches can get some more love. At the top, of course, there's less obstructions because there's less branches, so maybe you want to kind of pack in a bit more yellow at the top up here. There's less obstructions. We can bathe the top of this tree in some lovely yellow, just giving it some nice lighting. It's totally up to you what you want to do. I keep saying it because it's very true. A couple more dashes maybe on the far left hand side where maybe some lighting's wrapping around the tree somehow, but ultimately that is what we want to be looking for. Now I mentioned they're temporary because you can tap on these layers and we can lower the opacity if required. So for example, we can bring the opacity down of the greens here. We could bring the greens down to something around about say 70 to 80%, maybe not too strong. Let's then go ahead and go to the yellows and tap on them and bring them down as well. Maybe we don't want this tree to be too colourful because it's not at the foreground, it's in the midground. So we want it to be a little bit sort of more muted. So I'm going to bring the yellows, should I say, down to around about 78% there. And the other thing we can do is we can tap on the tree layer here. You can create another new layer. Again, it's temporary. I'll save your layers in a minute, I promise. Let's go ahead and grab this colour here, the bottom of the third column from the right. And what we want to do is we want to look for any little gaps here and see if we can, with the brush, just bring that down a bit smaller, maybe down to about 5 or 6 in the gaps where you can see a little bit of the trunk sticking through. Just add in a few little dashes of the brown on here to kind of show where you can see the tree trunk in there. A couple in there right at the top. Can we get any sort of area? I don't think we can. So you don't have to fill in the whole trunk top to bottom. It's just those tiny little gaps. As I mentioned, you can save on your layers now. So if you need to, you can tap on here. You can go ahead and merge it down, tap on the greens, merge it down, tap on this one and merge it down. It's totally up to you. So they're all done, your tree. We're going to go above the bushes here that we created. So these bushes, we're going to create a new layer. We're going to go ahead then and go to the greens. We're going to grab this color here, the top of the fifth column from the left now. So top of the fifth column from the left. We're going to go back to our brush and we're going to go back into miscellaneous and we're going to use the dry sponge again. And the size probably going to want to be around about sort of, I think we could go up to around about the 60 to 70 mark here. So if it lets me sort of drop into the middle, sometimes it likes to jump. And let's see what we can do. Let's go over to here. Let's manually do it over here. So let's set that to around about sort of 68. Again, let's go up to the 3 dots and hit save just to be sure our progress is of course saved. And we're going to take a look down here. I've got these bush-like shapes. I'm going to go round in a circular fashion. I am not clipped. So whatever I create here will expand beyond the sort of boundary and the silhouette of this area of land. I'm going across the base of the tree. We want to create a bush here. I want to create another big kind of bush here too. I'm going to bring the brush size down. I'm going to bring it down to around about sort of the, let's bring that down to about 50. I'm going to add in a bit of green here at the base of the tree. And every rounded sort of shape you can add, we want to add in some green to the top sort of right hand side more so of the tree, of the bush. So we're adding in another bush here. I've got like one there, one, maybe two together, another two together. I've got another bush down here, of course. And then in this dark space, you want to create more bushes, but leave gaps in between. So I'm creating a gap there for a rock in a moment, and then maybe another little bit of green just there, just a tiny little one. So I've got a big gap there I can add some color to in a minute. And then on the bottom left area of some of those little squiggles, just add in the tiniest little sort of light coat of a little bit of extra green, just a tiny bit, just to flush out your bushes a bit more. Because this area of land has got really compact. Now what this will do is that will change the scale of your tree a little bit. So your tree may need to get scaled up and down, or as long as you're happy with it and it's on the opposite side, that's fine. So on this same layer, we're going to go to our color and grab the middle now of that fifth column from the left. Bring the brush size down. Let's bring it down to about the 40 mark. Top right edge of some of these bushes. You're going to add in some nice bright green tones in here. Some nice bright green. Lovely brush, this one. Really lovely brush. Let it sort of randomly just patch in. That's just it doing all the work for you. A little bit on that one. Definitely some on these ones up here, because these ones are really close to where the light's coming through. Maybe this one here doesn't get quite so much love. A little bit on there too. You want to make sure you go right up towards the edges as well, just to kind of show the lighting and where it's coming from the most. Lovely stuff. So that's kind of the aesthetic we're going for. We're going to then bring the brush size down again to about 24 this time. We're going to go to the bottom of that fifth column from the left this time. I'm going to zoom in, add in some additional colors in here. Put them where you think is applicable. I'm not going to add any back here because I think the tree would block a little bit. More so on this right hand side over here. On top of some of the bright green. So you're always looking for where you just added your color to. Can you then add some more color on top? And by tapping and leaving gaps, you're creating more detail. You're creating areas where the light is crashing onto the bushes. So with your bushes now done, we're going to go into our layers here, and we're going to make sure we're grabbing this layer here. So it's the land. We're going to tap on the land and we're going to alpha lock it. So we can't paint outside of what's already on that layer. We're going to go ahead and make sure our brush is miscellaneous still and the dry sponge again. But your color wants to change to the color here at the bottom of the third column from the right. And the other thing we're going to do is we're going to go to the opacity and flow here. And we're going to go ahead and bring these down. I reckon to around about sort of 50 to 60 should be pretty good. So 55 or 56, 57 as well. And then down here with a brush size, let's set that brush size to around about sort of 50 mark-ish, if it'll allow me. It's not letting me do very much today. 50, then drag down in a sort of diagonal fashion here, and keep overlapping a few of them so you can get different tones in here. And this is all the rock making its way down towards the water's edge. Go down in some areas a bit more vertical, some areas here go up towards your bushes a bit more, make it nice and random. But this is your edge of your land, and just over here on the left hand side, kind of just add the few specks, but nothing too much. And that should just give you this nice rocky effect, like so. And earlier I mentioned you can create some rocks. If we create a new layer temporarily again, we're going to zoom in here. And if we go around in a sort of circular motion, just like here, so the top edge of this bush almost is the key point here. If I go round here like so, adding in like a rock in there. Now, if that just needs a little bit of sort of fixing, you can go to your eraser. You could tap on your eraser and go to something. Let's find a sort of fine brush. Let's go into our paint. Let's go to the fine blender brush here. And if the brush size is set to around about sort of the 35 mark, towards the bottom here, I can just sort of very lightly just erase in a circular motion, just kind of pushing it back, almost creating a shadow on top of it. And then you may need to also sharpen up the top. So maybe just sort of chop right across there and allow that rock to have a nice sort of angular look to it. And you've buried a rock then inside the little bushes there. You may have space also to switch back to your brush and do another one. So like introduce like another big boulder over here, like so. Then go ahead and grab your eraser again and then just blend out behind the bush blend out at the bottom of it, and then maybe just sharpen up the edge if you think it's necessary. But otherwise, you'll chuck some extra sort of landscape elements in there. How beautiful does that look? Now, at this point, we're done with land 1 and land 2, and we can now start to work on our reflections. So what we're going to do is, if you're done with land 2 and you're happy with it, you don't need to make any changes, you can go ahead and, of course, tap on the group and flatten it. That's totally fine. However, we're going to move into reflections. So what we're going to do is we're going to tap on land 1 here. We're going to use this option here of copy merged. If we tap on that, it will give you a brand new layer with everything that's in that group on a brand new layer. So we're going to drag that down towards where our watercolor area is here. We're going to also do the same for land 2, copy merged, drag it down, put it down here, and we will chuck it in front. And we're going to do the same for the mountain, copy merged and drag it down. And that's going to sit at the bottom. So now we've got 3 layers in this group. Now it's not actually a group at this point, so we'll pinch them together, we'll rename this and we'll call it water. And obviously straight after this, we will save our work as well. So hit rename for water and 3 dots and save. Look how nice and easy and organized that is. So we open up our water group. What we're going to do is we're going to grab the top layer, which is this area over here. We're going to go to our create options. We're going to go to edit, basic transformation. We're going to go ahead and we're going to rotate it until it's upside down, and then we're going to flip it horizontally like so, and then we're just going to drag it down like this until we zoom in and we make sure that the end of the land there is somewhat touching, so we've got a little bit of an extra reflection there, and also make sure it doesn't get chopped off in any way. Then go to your basic option here and go to distort, and then just grab the bottom middle node here and just squish that down. Again, you may need to sort of reposition that, but just a little bit like so, and hit the tick when you're done. We're going to tap on this layer. We're going to bring its opacity down to around about sort of the 70 to 80 mark. We're going to go to our smudge tool. We're going to tap on the smudge tool. We're going to go ahead and bring this down. So we're going to go into paint. We're going to go to the fine blender brush under smudge. And you can see the settings here. So the flow is a lot lower, but the opacity is maxed. Size, we've got it set to 118. And all we're going to do is smudge down. Smudging in a vertical fashion, nice and low down, bringing a little bit of that down, blending it into what will be our water in our little lake here, and a really simple, really beautiful reflection. You want to get rid of a lot of the details, so don't be afraid. And now I've got pressure sensitivity available to me, so you may not, so yours may go really heavy really quickly. Again, that's why we lowered down some of the settings a second ago. Now, don't be afraid, once you've smudged down as well, if you think things have got a bit too far, smudge from an empty area and push back up. You can reduce it back down again, just like we did with the clouds. So all of these things are just sort of repetitive elements that we can introduce in our work that, you know, matter across the board, really. So we've got some lovely green tones there, going to make their way into our water. Look how beautiful that is. Let's repeat. So we go to the other land. We go ahead and so it's over on the right hand side. We go to our create options and go to the option of edit, basic transformation. I'm going to move this across. We can rotate it until it's upside down and then flip it horizontal and then move it down. And we're looking for the edge of the land. Let's move that out of the way. We're looking for the edge of the land over there to kind of just sort of piece together nicely. And then over here on the right, make sure you go right up to the edge of the canvas and hit the tick when you're done. Tap on this layer, let's bring its opacity down. Let's bring it down to around about sort of the, let's go to about the 70 mark. And you've still got your smudge tool selected, do exactly the same. Smudge them trees down. Smudging it down. Getting rid of some of their shape. It's a lot further back, so you can be a little bit more aggressive with the smudge if you want. You know, all you need to do is just tap, 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 tap. Making sure you drag down. Dragging down. You can drag up as well, and then making sure as you get towards the edge of the land over there, you kind of just allow it just to be nice and tidy, nice and neat. And I'm going to bring down a few more of these in certain areas. Really stretch some occasional random ones out quite far, like maybe we bring down some of these ones a little bit further and then just smudge them back up a little bit just to tidy up the shape. But in general, you should end up with a nice sort of reflection like so. And of course, we've got our mountain to do. So we tap on the mountain. We go up to our cursor, we go to edit, basic transformation. We rotate it until it's upside down. We flip it till it's then the right way, and then we move it down. And we're moving it down until it kind of sits about here. Again, make sure you just check the edges. Make sure you've not left a gap on either side. Go to basic, and we're going to go to basic, and we're going to go to distort. We're going to grab the middle node here and just flatten that down a little bit. And then tap the tick when you're done. We're going to tap on this layer and we're going to bring its opacity right down. We're going to bring it down to around about sort of, let's go to about 40% here. It's way far back, so we don't want to see too much detail. And that's really important now when you go to smudge. So let's set the brush size a little bit larger. Let's go to 150 this time. And smudge, get rid of all of those sharp edges. Definitely get rid of it over here. So kind of just breaking it down. And we just want a bit of a kind of general reflection. Nothing too sort of purposeful. We're smudging out almost every single element of it. I'm gliding my pen all the way over the whole thing, just so we can somewhat see a bit of a reflection, but nothing too much. And also we don't want it to interfere with the reflections of the land areas either. So we may want to sort of smudge down a little bit here just to try and push it away from the area of land there for our land reflection. And there we go, we've got some wicked reflections. Now, while we're in this group, let's go ahead and create another new layer. We'll go to this color here, the middle of the third column from the right. We're going to go back to our paintbrush and tap on our paintbrush. Let's go back into paint. Let's go ahead and use the fine blender brush. We will bring the size right down. We want to make it nice and small, probably around about sort of the 8 marker there. Let's bring the opacity and flow down a little bit. So the opacity's come down to 60. Flow is very low at 24. We're going to zoom in because we're going to introduce some little streaks here off of the end of some of the land. Now we do need to make sure that we sort of don't overlap sort of the land too much. So you don't need to go all the way right up to the edge every single time. And we're just pushing out really beautiful light strokes here and there. But what this does do, it does highlight kind of the edge of your land. So it really will sort of help someone looking at this understand what it is they're looking at, understand that it is a piece of water, and also it helps separate your reflections as well. Your reflections that we just introduced are now pushed a little bit further backwards, underneath the water now. Now here at the front, you can make things fairly white if you want. The river is flowing down through here, it's coming across and it's hitting this corner of the land, and then there's ripples being sort of sent all the way over here. And because the flow is so nice and low at the minute, you can really build up this kind of wispy looking aesthetic to the water. You can put a couple more little drags here and there in the water. You can go ahead and go right up here and highlight the edge of the land if you wish. If you're going to do that, like I'm trying to here, you want to do very little of it. We're going to go along the edge, but we're talking like a pixel, maybe a tiny pixel or two of just a little bit of highlight on that area of land, and that's it. Again, some of this may get covered up anyway, but right up here, just the tiniest pixel of color. Just again, highlight the land and separate it from the water. A couple of tiny streaks. Remember, obviously, here, this is really far back, so we don't want to do long streaks in here. You kind of want to do taps. Down here at the front, you've got more liberty to create a few longer streaks here and there, but nothing too much back there. Lovely stuff. That is all you need to do to create that beautiful water effect. Let's then go ahead and also, while we're in this group, we're going to tap on this layer here, create another new layer. We will go to our colors and we will introduce this color here, the middle of the second column from the right. Go back to your brush. Let's go into the option of sprayers, and we're going to go to the option of soft airbrush. The settings are what they were before. We've got them maxed out at the minute. Let's just bring them down. I like to always have control. So let's go down to around about sort of the 64 mark each. We're going to move that across. And we're going to go left to right here and just make the water a little bit whiter and brighter down here. So it kind of blends into this lighter tone right at the very bottom here. You don't need to overdo it. If you do, you can just tap on the layer and bring the opacity down. But just a nice light tone a little bit closer towards us. So I've just brought mine down a smidge. 15% I've brought mine down. Now, that is your water done with. At this point, you are more than welcome to tap on that and also flatten it. So you can literally at this point almost flatten everything down into one layer if you wish. I'm going to go right to the top of my layer. So I'm going to create a new layer and drag it all the way to the very top. I will go ahead and I will add it into a group straight away, and we'll rename this group. We'll go ahead and we'll call this foreground because it's right in front of us. So you're on the last stage now. So we're going to hit rename. We're going to go ahead and hit the 3 dots and save, of course. And this layer here, and we're going to go ahead and grab this color here, the top of the 3rd column there. Your brush wants to go back in quickly just to the option of calligraphy and the monoline brush. And we're going to zoom in, and we're just going to introduce another piece of land that's just going to sit at the very bottom edge down in this corner. And that's going to start roughly down here. I'm just going to swoop that up into a piece of land over here like so. That looks nice. Let's go ahead and grab our create option, go to fill, tap and drag to the right hand side just to fill that in, and hit the tick when you're done. And just like we did on the other layers, we've got trees and bushes to introduce in this space, as well as a pathway as well. So we're going to go ahead and we'll create a new layer. Now, what you might need to do is on this layer, let's go to our fill tool. Let's go ahead and grab white. So I'll change our color here to white and just tap and fill the whole screen. Then tap on that layer and bring the opacity right down. Bring it down to around about sort of 30%. It's a temporary layer because everything in behind has got a little bit of darkness to it. You might not be able to see your tree too well. So we're going to create another new layer. We're going to tap on the tick because we're done with our fill tool. We're going to again grab that color at the top of the 3rd column. Your brush wants to be set back into charcoals. Soft charcoal. We'll move our layers out of the way. We're going to move our design because we're going to draw in the basic tree structure, and we want it to be a nice grand tree over here, nice and large. So we're going to start here and we are going to draw in a tree trunk that's coming down. Maybe it's got a little bit of a curve to it. You know, maybe something like that. You don't have to make it quite as exaggerated as that. Maybe it comes back on itself and it's sort of got a bit of an unevenness to it. That always, in my opinion, looks really good because it's just natural. And I'm going to go right to the top of our canvas, right up here. And then from there, we repeat exactly the same steps we did before. So let's first of all go down the tree. And I'm going to set the brush size a bit bigger. So it was 5, now it's set to 15. And we're going to come down here. Let's see if we can make that brush go to 15. In fact, let's go smaller than that. Sorry, let's go to about 12. We're going to block out the bottom here. So the tree needs to, of course, get a little bit thicker towards the bottom. I'm going to go back up a few times just to sort of make that a little bit thicker over and over. But ultimately, thicker at the bottom, thinner at the top. And then from there, we'll go back to our brush. We'll bring it to a size that you're happy with. I think something around about 9 should do the trick here. Again, I'm going to probably leave the top a little bit more naked and then occasionally have like a branch sticking out. So just like a little bit up the top there, a little bit more thinned out. Some new shoots towards the top. And then let's go ahead and ignore that message. Let's go ahead and just run this across here. Running this across and creating the same aesthetic we did before. So just creating little avenues for all of our branches, maybe the odd small one in there, and then maybe it gets a lot thicker here. So maybe these ones are a little bit more drooped down. Variation will look great, obviously, as always. And if you need to, maybe make the brush size a bit smaller because it's a little bit closer towards us. Maybe we should start to think about being a little bit more fine with the details. Because these are right in front of us, we're going to see a lot of them. So we're going to come across, we're going to kind of zigzag our pen again to create branches after branches. I'm going to see in the gaps if I think it's applicable to add in a new one. And we'll just keep going. We'll keep making our way down this tree. So you can again have that variety. I'm going to jump like to a point, say down here, where I can see the kind of tree and kind of gauge where it's going to go. But if I set kind of a width, I've got like a guide to kind of basically go like this and say, okay, that's in my head kind of the blueprint for this tree. Maybe I'll let this one run a little bit further astray. Zigzags like this do actually work. Like just really simple zigzags along here because they're just tons of branches that are just at certain angles that look a certain way. That's all it really is. A couple more tree branches running across. So let's keep going. Again, you are at the sort of latter stages of this tutorial on this side of the land, so I hope you've enjoyed it. I've had a lot of fun making it, And I love these landscapes. I love a mountain landscape. It's a bit of a running joke between me and my friends. We're up to 13 on the brush size. That actually looks a bit too big. I'm going to bail on that. I'm going to go back down to around the 10 mark. I'm in a bit more control. In fact, I think it was a 9. Let's go back down to the 9. So I've got that nice thin point on the end that I can be in a bit more control with. Again, you might be able to see that mine's really thin, but it won't stay like that. I say it's really thin in terms of how much is there, because in a minute I'll go back in, I'll widen some of these out, I'll chuck some more branches in the gaps, all these types of things. So sometimes I just jump about a tree quite easily just to kind of chuck in again that blueprint that I can see. At the bottom here, I'm going to go really, really wide with this one. I'm going to create lots of avenues and branches here, off of here, more here. You see, it doesn't have to really take too long. It doesn't have to take too much effort. We're just creating those lovely kind of C shapes or U shapes or whatever in those gaps just to fill out the tree. And ultimately, you could also do branches that are sort of unique to one side of the tree. Mine obviously go left to right every time, but you can create a branch that doesn't quite go that far. In the middle, do not be afraid to just run your pen randomly like this. Just create lots more dashes. You can really block out the tree in the middle if you want as well, really showing the density of some of the branches either on the opposite side, right in the middle, or right in front of us that are pointing right at us. So many angles with a tree that it's quite hard to sort of show all of that. And sometimes it's just a matter of chucking in the colour. Get it chucked in. Be brave. How's that looking? That's looking quite nice. It's a nice sort of skinny approach to it. I quite like that aesthetic, and I'm not going to actually add in too much. I'm going to keep this one a little bit skinny. I didn't initially in my original version of this, but I'm going to in this one. I really like it. I'm going to set the brush size to something a little bit smaller now, about sort of 5, and we're going to add in some more small branches, more purposefully placed ones in here. A couple of them kind of shooting upright at a bit of an angle here and there. A couple where I think is applicable, maybe a couple of these tiny ones in the gaps, you know, tiny little ones. And that looks awesome. Really, really pleased with how that looks. Nice and sort of got kind of basic look to it. Now again, I'm just going to sort of wiggle my pen here. You see how wide I'm going? I'm not going too far. I'm going to wiggle my pen along both sides just to create that density in the middle. Not towards the top though, towards the bottom more so, because it's going to be a lot thicker towards the bottom. So just running that up and down. That's all it needs to be. So let's go ahead and create a new layer. Let's tap on that layer. I've created 2, but that's fine. We'll clip this layer here, and I'll delete the one above so we're all at the same. So we've got one new layer. It's clipped to the tree. We're going to go ahead and grab the same green, so the middle color there in the 5th column from the right. Same brush, round about sort of, let's go to about sort of the 8 marker there. So let's drag this out to the 8 marker. And clipped to the tree, again, we're going to go along some of here. Now I'm going to make that brush size actually bigger. That one's a bit too small and too fine. I'm going to go to 16 here. Oh, that's lovely. That gives me a lot more texture. Look at what I'm doing. Dragging along those tree branches with just lines. Just lines, especially here at the bottom. Lots of angled lines. So some of them pointing a bit further down, some of them pointing outwards more horizontally as we make our way towards the outer edges. So in the middle, just like before, a couple of lines pointing down. Look at how that tells me that that branch is pointing towards me. A couple more out here. Really, really simple, isn't it? When you break it down sometimes to how simple it can be, it is really, really encouraging. Don't have to really overcomplicate it. This tree has the sun right behind it, so focus the light in a bit more on the outside edges. So the outside edges of some of these edges here. A couple in the middle, of course. A little bit of green here and there won't do us any problems. But the sun is on the opposite side, so we are going to see a lot of silhouette here. We will create another new layer for the yellowy tone at the bottom of that 5th column from the right. We're going to zoom in again, and we're going to add in the tiniest little bit on the kind of the edges of some of the branches. This one needs to be like a little bit better sort of position. So you're going to focus it a bit more on the outside edges. A little bit like this, because the sun's on the opposite side, remember. So we're going to bring the highlight around here on the edges. So both sides are getting just the tiniest little bit of yellow tone on the edges. Up here at the top again, when things get a little bit less dense, you will have to sort of factor that in. And okay, I need to add in some highlight on pretty much all of these because there's so little that can block it. The sun simply has to be catching on these branches. So towards the top, you end up with these nice yellowy tones. Towards the middle, you've got all the dark tones. Now, what we're going to do is we're going to add in the tree trunk again. So we'll tap on the tree, we'll create a new layer. It will clip itself in between, and we'll grab the color here at the bottom of the third column from the right. So bring your brush size down to something around about sort of the 10 mark. Where can you see your tree trunk? Chuck in a bit of color here, bit of color there. Keep it nice and light if you can. A little bit up the tree, a little bit up towards the very top. Up here, definitely seeing some of the tree. In the gaps, right at the top, you can make sure that the brush gets a little bit smaller, maybe around about 7 here, and you just definitely add in the wood right towards the top. Lovely stuff. You should be able to see your tree, and grab your eraser, tap on your eraser. Fine blender is fine, we used it before, and just dash in and break that down. Just a couple of taps here and there. You can see I'm just tapping, breaking down where maybe something is blocking the tree trunk. We can't see all of it, but we can see a little bit of color. That looks really, really cool. Now, they're separated layers because, again, you can decide, do you want to bring the color down or not? I recommend you wait. I wouldn't get rid of the tree colors just yet. So hold on to them for a moment. We're going to go ahead and we're going to go in front of the tree again. So we'll create a new layer at the top, tap on it and turn off the clip. Hit your 3 dots and save. We want to go ahead and grab the color here again at the top of the third column. Your brush wants to go back to the option of miscellaneous and the dry sponge. And we're going to set the size to something a bit larger, maybe around about the 100 mark. And before, I got you to create this white layer. We want to delete that layer now. So we'll tap on it and we'll delete it. Because you wouldn't have been able to see your tree here, would you? Because of the dark landing behind. So on this layer again at the top of the foreground group, we're going round in circular motions. Let's make sure when we bring the brush size down just to 80, and bring the opacity and the flow back up to 100. I'm going to go round in a circular motion here. I want to make sure these bushes have got some solid aesthetic to it. Nice wiggle down here. You can create some purposeful circular sort of areas here for a bit of the bush maybe sticking outwards like that. That's lovely and random. And then another little one down here too. So just like before, we will go ahead and create a new layer. We'll grab our green at the top of the 5th column. And let's go to town on adding in some bushes down here. So we'll go round in a circular motion, sort of down here on top of that dark tone, which is just your base color. You want to leave gaps where you want to isolate bushes from one another. So we've got a bush here, got a bit of green that runs all the way down to the very bottom. Bear in mind, in a minute, there'll be a path in those 2 lines there. So we don't want to add any purposeful details in kind of this area. We want to focus it over towards these edges over here. So we'll go round, circular motion, adding in all these little sort of patches of color. Maybe another small one here that gets really close to the path, maybe a couple of smaller ones underneath. That'll look nice. And then we'll go ahead and go to our colors. We'll grab the middle of the 5th column, bring that brush size down to around about sort of the 50 mark. And we're going to add in some tone on the top. So a little bit of green on top of here. Again, let the patchiness of the brush take over. Let it just decide where it wants to sort of scatter some colour in. That is your best friend. It's doing all the work for you. Leave some of these darker areas, but maybe the odd little tap here and there where it's just a little bit of green, a little leaf or something sticking out, or a little branch of this bush species. A little bit of green along there too. A couple of patches. Let's go up on here too. A couple more. We have got further tones, so you can add a good amount of this one. We're then going to go ahead and grab the green at the bottom of that 5th column now. Let's bring the brush size down again a little bit further, down to about 40 mark. Looking for your bushes, you can add in some more colour. Now, you don't have to do every single bush. You can sparingly add this in. It just creates variety in your colour tones. Lovely stuff. Lots of patches. Look how quick and easy I'm doing it. You should do exactly the same thing. You're just looking for those circular shapes. You're looking for, have you added some here? So maybe don't do it here. I've added some there, but I haven't added any sort of down here by the path. Now at this point, you're done with the bushes. Let's just hit the three dots and save for a minute. Let's go ahead and add in some detail on top of the bushes here. So some flowers almost. You can do it on the same layer if you wish. Let's save yourself some layers. Let's grab the middle color here in the fourth column. It's like a very subtle pink tone. We're going to go to our brush and we're actually going to go into the option of sprayers. This might sound really odd, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to use the blood splatter brush for some tiny little wild flowers. So we're going to use that. The size is set all the way down to 32 and the opacity and flow is set to 100. And then what you're going to do is you're going to pick a bush, and then this species of bush here has some very lovely pink wildflower in here. And we can just tap that around a few times. In some of the dark spots will look great. Lovely stuff. And then switch it to then the bottom of that fourth column. A little bit of yellow tone then in the bush beside it. Don't be afraid to tap a couple of yellows though in between the pinks maybe. You know, you're just creating wildflower. Then grab the orangish tone at the bottom of the third column. A couple of dashes in here, like so. I'll add in a few on here too. Really light with your pressure if you can. And then you've got a bright green, the middle of that third column. And tap away with some of the greens in here. Maybe these aren't wildflower, maybe these are just leaves of the bush of some sort. You know, whatever it may be, it doesn't really matter. We're just trying to add in that tiny extra one additional element which says this is closer to us, and we know it's closer because we can see more detail, and we can see more detail because of these little tiny little speckles of something. This one's further away. We have no idea if there's any flowers in it. As you get closer, look at the difference. Back there, we only added these tiny little sort of speckles of colour, didn't we, on those forest trees? And as we've got closer, we've introduced a new element every single time to show detail. Now, don't be afraid to, again, go back in with the pink, chuck the pink into some of the bushes, maybe some of the gaps as well. Add as much as you need to. Don't overdo it, though. Maybe even grab the colour here in the top right, this slightly brighter pink, and maybe add in a few more here too. You can tap away. Maybe one bush is absolutely covered in wildflower. That'll look really nice. Just the odd bush. You don't want to do absolutely everywhere, but one bush will look really, really nice. Maybe just a couple down here right at the very edge of the canvas. Lovely stuff. As I mentioned, we've got a path to create. Let's go ahead and create a new layer. Let's grab the colour here at the bottom of the third column from the right. Before we do, let's go ahead and hit the three dots and save. So we've grabbed the bottom colour here in the third column from the right. Your brush wants to be back into paint. We're going to go ahead and we're going to scroll through here. We're going to go ahead and we're going to use the thick filbert brush here. Now I'm going to set the, you can see the flow and opacity. I'm just going to bring them down to about sort of mid 80s. I'm going to grab the brush and bring it down to around about the 150 mark. That looks pretty good. And we're going to introduce a path. Now at the minute, when we swoop this path in, it goes right over the top of some of our little bushes there. Now that's fine for a moment because we'll just scrape around where we need our little path to go. I'm leaving a bit of a gap down there in the bottom right. We'll then go ahead and we will go to our eraser. We'll tap on the eraser. We'll go ahead and in the paint group, we will use the fine blender as our eraser. We're going to go to our settings. I'll just make sure that you can see them there. We'll set this size 33, looks a bit too small. We'll go up to around about 60. And where you can see the circular areas of your bushes, just go round in a circular motion and create a shadow underneath the bush and show how the path does not show here. It kind of sits underneath the bushes. Maybe the bushes have sort of grown on top of the path here. I'm just going to erase. We'll get rid of here as well. We'll get rid of sort of the edge here as well, as if to say the bush just overhangs and creates a shadow here. And maybe I'll just kind of erase the edges a little bit there. Now that path, now it looks like it really sinks in there, but to me some of the colors are a little bit off. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to switch to a dark tone. So we'll grab the top color here in the third column from the right. We're going to go to our brush. We're going to tap on our brush. We're going to go into the option of sprayers. We're going to use the medium brush. I'm going to set the size though. So medium airbrush right down to something nice and small, maybe around about sort of 20 point there. And the opacity, flow and softness is as you can see. And what we're going to do is we're going to sort of curve we're going to create like a bit of a curve, almost like up here is a little bit raised on the right hand side. So we're just curving in a few lines that run astray. Likewise on the left hand side, curve it in towards the middle. So we're coming down and swooping down and in. These are little areas of the dirt, etc., that kind of identify the land and tell us the contour of it. So here I'm pushing this in. I'm going to bring the size down a little bit lower, down to around about 13. And then in the middle, I'm just going to draw in some gaps. I'm going to draw in some cracks in the dirt, some variation in here, some detail. I'm going to swoop that down again and create little areas of detail. Bring the size down even further, maybe down to about a 6. Couple of little scrapes in here in the actual pathway. Look at that. Just little areas of detail and dirt, etc. And just how the land has a little bit of something going on in there. Now, at the minute, that already looks like we've got a nice amount of sort of detail coming along. That looks really nice. We can boost this a little bit further by grabbing the color at the bottom of the second column from the right. Bring the size up, about sort of 20 now, and just slowly, very, very lightly in the middle of the path, introduce in the gaps, avoiding your shadows where possible, some nice light orange. You may need to bring your settings down a little bit more if you're struggling with the sort of application of this. But what we then need to do is we need to bring our brush size even further down, probably down to around about a 10. We're going to zoom in, and where you've added like a little bit of darkness here, we want to add the top of that. So you overlap it ever so slightly, and you create this kind of, here's the lighting, here's a divot on the opposite side. It's almost like you're creating all these really detailed kind of grooves in the ground. One's a little bit raised, and then a shadow is then created on the opposite side. So look at that, zoom out, and you're starting to build in all this detail in the path. A couple more scrapes here and there. Lovely. And you're highlighting the right hand side. You're highlighting where that lighting is, which is over there somewhere. It's coming across, it's hitting the tiniest little mound of dirt, and then it's just giving us a little bit of a highlight. And you can bring that brush size even further if you want, all the way down to like a 5, and just purposefully add in like really sharp areas. And even in the gaps, just dash in. Look at that, just random imperfections in the dirt, tapping away. So as long as I go kind of horizontal and follow the contour of the land, i.e. it scoops up at the sides, I am at I have full permission in order to just keep going and detailing this and tapping and scraping, creating all the, again, real world imperfections of this path. Little scrapes here and there. Obviously when it gets off to the right hand side, you can kind of tone it down a little bit, but you should end up with a bit of a pathway like this. If it gets a bit too bright, just increase the brush size up again to about 22% and just very lightly kind of fade out some of those highlights. So, you know, you're introducing more color, but you're kind of now increasing the brightest tones, the general brightest tones, and so it takes away some of those other areas a little bit. So with that done, we can then triple check that we've added in the right amount of shadow under here. So I've just switched back to my eraser. Just going to try and lightly just go down this left edge, very, very, very light with my pressure, just trying to show how that tones down a little bit like that. We've got this lovely path beside the lake. Now at this point, you can go ahead and you're done. Now, if you want to, you can, first of all, let's get rid of our grid. You can swipe on your layers, so you can collapse that down, should I say, and you're done. But what you can do, this is totally optional, right at the end, go to this option here. This is where you've got some additional sort of filters. You can go to saturation here, tap on saturation, and I'm pretty happy that if you drag this all the way up to around about here, it still looks really good. And you could go all the way to the top, but it looks a bit extreme, it looks a bit psychedelic. You know, it makes your work look black and white every time I do this, which is why I kind of don't like doing it all the time. But if you drag it to around about the 50 mark, that looks really good in terms of color change. And by the way, this is an editable layer. So if I go ahead and create a new layer, for example, I can go back to there and it's already available for me to do. It affects everything underneath it. Let me get rid of that empty layer. You can also create another new layer and go to your curves here. And you get this grid. Now this is your dark tones, this is your highlight tones. If I go ahead and bring that highlight tone just across a tiny bit, look at that. That's the extreme. And then that's where we were before. If you bring it across the tiniest bit, you'll just brighten it up a little bit, like so. So I've just brought that across the tiniest bit. You may or may not need to do that, but it's just a minor little change that you may want to adjust. And to be honest, I think we're done. I think we're completely done. So what we can do is we can swipe our layers over to the right hand side. We can of course pinch with 2 fingers, go full screen with 4, and we end up with today's finished design. So I hope you enjoyed creating this beautiful lakeside design. As always, if you want to, you can support the channel and the work that I do here by becoming a member of the channel. There is a link in the description down below. You get a loyalty badge beside your name. You get early access to these types of tutorials, as well as also sneak peeks of more content to come. So make sure to hit the link in the description down below and support the work that I do here on the channel. And if you want to, you can also tag me in your finished creations over on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, anywhere that I am. Everything will be linked in the description down below. Thank you so much for completing today's design. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next one.